Hétero.
And I'm just now realizing that I don't have Carl's fun, exciting, upbeat intro music, so I'm gonna play this music instead. It's a little more mellow than what we're used to. Carl usually plays that fun, dancey music, but here we are with some nice, mellow music. And for everybody that's watching, it does look a little bit different. We have a guest host tonight, Miss Amanda. And Carl is stuck at work, and Ashley is on an airplane, so neither one of them were available tonight, but the show must go on. So here we are. And tonight, our guest is Mr. Jake Bishop. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely, man. If you wouldn't mind, maybe we could just jump right in. You can tell us a little bit more about you.
I'm all warmed up now. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, I was going to thank you, Amanda. Thanks for doing this interview as well. I know having a guest host, I'm hoping you can throw me some good questions on there I won't be ready for.
I got you.
So, my name's Jake Bishop. I've been in recovery for 3 years. I work at Baden Street Settlement in Rochester, New York. I also host Rising Up Recovery on 100.9 WXIR. So we speak to healthcare workers, former substance users, politicians, and a lot of community activists about healthcare, addiction, recovery. And we do it every week. And slowly we started to expand into some other community events. And we've been very blessed to be able to put a meeting together actually this week with a lot of community members and leaders who are going to be changing our nonprofit board so we can start making some sober living housing in Rochester, New York.
Oh, that's awesome, man. It's always good to hear about people that are on the front lines that are out there doing the work and being involved with the community. It's awesome, man.
Yeah, being at Baden Street now, Baden Street Settlement, they hired me because somebody on their staff was listening to my radio show, and I had just said, "Hey, I'm a certified peer now. I'm looking to be able to help out in some sort of way." And they contacted me via Facebook, like so many of these connections we make.
Mhm.
And next thing I know, I'm working for them as a care manager, organizing people's contact with providers, scheduling any sort of appointments they have. And it's been, I got to say, some of these people are pretty stubborn I work with because I remember being in recovery like that. So it makes it that much harder to work with.
Mm, mm. So I'd love to hear more about the radio show, how you got involved with that. Is that something that you've were you in radio and broadcast before you found recovery? What is that whole how did that play out?
God, no. I was. I think everybody had mentioned something about, hey, listen, I think you might be interested in doing something in entertainment one day. Of course, mixed in with a lot of arrests for trafficking and distribution and a lot of other drug arrests. I found myself in my first few months of recovery. I had just had another DWI, and it led me to a point where I got a canine unit on my leg. I went to the hospital, was arrested. I sat down and I thought I'm going to go back to court. And it was in front of the same judge I had seen 10 years before
Ooh.
for my other DWI. And as you know, judges are not happy to be woken up on a Sunday morning, and especially not to see the same guy that they told if they ever see you in my courtroom again. And so I took that time to reflect, and I went back to the gym. Um, I always try to take care of myself and weight lift and everything, but I did it almost every single day. I went two times, three times I got a dog, ironically a German Shepherd, from a shelter, and we had this sort of understanding. Like, I'm going to take you out every single time I feel like using. So this poor dog probably went out for 5 miles a day because I felt like I have to use a lot. And I went to a festival and they had recovery related services there. And I spoke to a gentleman that I was very familiar with. It was Tony Gingello. And Tony was a known, say, how do you, he was known to be part of an Italian American subculture. And his uncle was actually blown up by a car bomb in Rochester uh, about 30 years ago. So I looked at him and he said, "Hey, I've got a radio show. I've changed my life a little bit, and I'd really be interested in being able to have you come on just as a guest and talk about your story." And as soon as I went on, I was nervous, but I felt comfortable. I felt like for a moment I was in control again. All that excitement, all that terror of knowing what the next day of recovery was going to be like, and still having a criminal case above my head. I said, "Hey, I think I might be able to get somebody else." And he said, "Well, perfect, Jake." He's got a very deep voice. "Jake, I gotta tell you, you gotta come on again. You gotta come on the show." And I said, "Let me get the mayor of this town, Robert Corby." And he was a Pittsford mayor of a very nice suburb here in Rochester. And he came on the show and we talked about addiction. He said, there's a lot of people in recovery in the suburbs. There's a lot of overdoses that people think it's only in the city. It's only based on minorities. And that opened the doors for us to be able to speak with people like Senator Jeremy Cooney, who legalized marijuana in the past year, Assemblyman Harry Bronson, and not a lot of great healthcare workers and former substance users that were willing to share their story and talk about some of the things that had got them through the recovery. We started off in a small little radio studio where as soon as you touched any of the boards, you could tell the wires were hot, or it felt like it was about to light up in flames if you touched the wrong button. And we had to upgrade. We got a good upgrade through a studio at Extreme Radio. It's 100.9 WXIR, and Extreme Radio is across the country, but they have a studio here in Rochester that they've generously allowed us to use, and we've got sponsorships. And it took us about a year before we got in there, but the past 2 years, all our shows have been out of there. They've got great capacity. They've to have guests from out of state because obviously during COVID, that was a big hurdle for everybody. I couldn't have anybody come in. If you did, you had to wear a hazmat suit or you had to be careful of shaking people's hands. It was limited to one person. And so I got to talk to a lot of people outside of Rochester, and then it started to become people outside of the country. And I think that's kind of the direction that we're going into right now with Rise Up Recovery. We're not just we're expanding with local people, but we're also trying to get into a network where we can speak to people across the country.
That's awesome, man. And I love just the story of you guys starting in that little tiny studio with terrible equipment and
It's terrible.
just
I,
I mean, I feel like that's all of our stories, man, like starting from the bottom and like working our way up and finding our voice and finding our niche to be able to give back to the recovery community. A few minutes ago, Randy Beard posted about using any and all platforms to educate, and I think that that's so important for us to
Absolutely.
use our voices and whatever our gifts may be. I never thought that I would be doing something like this. You know, I'm the kind of guy that likes to be behind the camera or the one like at the board. I'm not the one that likes to be in front of the camera or behind the mic. Um, and it feels like it just kind of fell into place that I am where I am
you
today.
look like you're in like Joe Rogan's studio right now, so that may be.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like that, and hopefully I'll start getting those Joe Rogan paychecks one day. But for now, this is just something I do in my free time.
That's another thing about
Here's to
recovery.
hoping,
It's
man.
always a lot of free time for us to be able to do what we want to do for other people in these support groups.
Absolutely. And JR is requesting that I find that I put the link for your show on the chat. So give me just a minute, JR. I'm trying to multitask here, man.
So, Jake, if you don't mind me stepping in, do you think that like the radio show Has that like been kind of like a blessing to help you stay sober? You know how they say like meetings, you need to be like participate and be active. Would you say that like the radio has kind of given you a little more of like a oomph into the like community?
You know, for me there was two parts to it. One was my life before recovery was linked very into criminal exploits. I was in 2015. I was charged with trafficking and distribution of 133 pounds of marijuana, and it's for having that connotation, having that reputation followed me. So being able to cleanse myself by being able to speak publicly about recovery made me accountable. It made me feel like I made a mistake, but I want people to see that I'm trying to build back, day by day, 1 hour at a time with one guest a week. But for that moment, it made me think, I'm like, well, I'm doing something to serve back from what I took in Rochester. And even if it takes me my whole life, I'd be prepared to pay that debt back. And it was cathartic. It did feel like I didn't get into AA, I didn't get into NA, but I wanted to expand on that. In fact, one of the blessings about this is I've been able to turn Rise of Recovery from just a radio show and move that into a direction where we can have community events. In the past couple of years, we've had giveaways. We've put out hundreds of coats. We have turkey giveaways, holidays. We go down in Joseph Avenue, which is hit very hard right now by a lot of crime. Last year we broke record over almost 100 people murdered and shootings. Yeah, it's a terrible location for the murders. But having that opportunity to be able to serve the public and work with partners, and unfortunately, the founder, Tony Gingello, passed away unexpectedly this year from a blood clot. So, being able to take over the mantle and speak to the news about how I would like to carry on his legacy has been a big part of my recovery. And sometimes I don't know if I would still be, this far in recovery without being able to speak on the radio.
I bet it helps with your lived experience as well, because I know, like, so I'm 4 years sober, and I just now started sharing my story in the last like few months, and it makes it so much easier, I think. Of course, I'm very much into being loud and recovering loudly, because I believe silence kills. But going on like, Recovery Revolution or a page like that with other like-minded people who I know aren't judging, and knowing that like your radio show, that it's going to, one person might hear one thing and they trust you more because or I know I would trust the situation more, knowing that you've been through your lived experience, is something that only you're going to understand. So you're not going to try to understand what I'm saying, put yourself in my position, because we can't. All of our walks and journeys are different. So I think it's awesome that you are taking, yes, you did wrong. That's what addiction does. We make bad choices. We embarrass ourselves, our family, our friends, our community. But you giving back in the way that you are is so powerful, because not only are you giving back, not only are you helping the people and inspiring people with your story and them sharing theirs, but you're also bringing so much awareness to your community, and furthermore, outward of the community, by giving people a platform and a safe place to come and just meeting them where they are and sharing.
That's a great sentiment, and that's absolutely true. Being able to talk to people who have been afflicted by addiction or trauma. One of the other things I like to bring up is recovery. To our radio show, to our mission, is not just about cocaine, drinking. It's also about recovering from sort of traumas. I've had the privilege of working with human trafficking court in Rochester. In fact, a lot of my clients in care management at Baden Street that I work with were through human trafficking, or people that have had sexual assaults. And so, in that, to me, has meant that I can share resources, places like the Center for Youth that help homeless teens in Rochester, people with 30 years experience who have seen that there's been an uptick in sex trafficking of children in the past 5 years, more than they've seen in the past 20 years with the exploitation. So it gives me a great honor and a privilege to be able to tell people it's okay to share your story in a safe place, in a comfortable place. I haven't been through what you've been through, but if I had a guest that shared her story or their story, and then I have another one, I can say, hey, listen, we're building on the strengths of everybody that's spoken before you. And now you've set a precedent where people could speak freely and be open without being judged.
Absolutely. And, May being mental health, Awareness Month, I think it's a perfect time for you to be on because you are hitting on so much. Like Randy just said, it all stems from some sort of mental health issues. Most of us have multiples.
Mm-hmm.
It's so true. Trauma, domestic violence, survivor's guilt. I mean, it's you working the problem is amazing and it's a huge step. But if you only work one problem and you don't investigate why that problem built so, addiction built so terribly and quickly and spiraled, there's always going to be something underlying. And we can start to try to solve the addiction problem, but depression, anxiety, especially social anxiety, that going out on the town, just like having to feel something, I've got to have this. If I'm going to go party, I've got to have this. In Charleston, when JR was at our event, I work for Wake Up Carolina, and we just had a silent auction for our 5-year celebration. And we were raising money for treatment facilities, scholarships, detox, harm reduction, Narcan, all that. And it was a non-alcoholic event. So we had mocktails instead of cocktails, and we named them, like cute little sober names. And it was amazing to hear so many people that said, wow, look at all these sober people having a blast with no alcohol. And social anxiety is such a big form to me of mental illness, mental health, because that's what I feel like a lot of the younger adults too. That's the beginning of the problem. You drink, you let your guard down, you might use, and then you've got something to prove and it builds, or, some drugs you're just automatically on it. So I think it's amazing that you're touching on, and like Randy said, I want to throw in PTSD because that is a huge, huge, huge thing.
Absolutely.
I've talked to JR about, I have no, military affiliation or, I've never been, but I feel obviously so highly of our, anybody in the military, veterans. And unfortunately, I can't reach them as closely because I don't have the lived experience, but we really need to work on more mental health, and it lately seems like we have been. So I'll stop rambling. I just wanted to, give you the shout out for being so awesome.
Thanks, Amanda. That was actually my first client that I lost to an overdose at Baden Street was a veteran. And we have a place, the Civic Center, and it's known as a place. It's a heated garage. People go in there. Try to speak with them. They have advocates come out all the time, but some people are very comfortable staying there. And he was in the Army. He came out. He didn't have an honorable discharge, but it wasn't a dishonorable discharge. I had a wonderful intern at the time who was in the military as a combat medic who did 2 tours, and we were able to get him into some place. We called him. We said, hey, listen, I've got the key literally to you walking into a new life. Jake will be out there to see you soon. We're going to get you organized, get you a couple outfits. He was like, no, I'm good. And, we tried to get him in again to recovery. And, later I got the phone call that he was found at the Civic Center. He had overdosed in a garage behind somebody's car, So I took that very personally. And that's one of the reasons why I want to give a shout out to the Mission Continues with Jeff Messinger here in Rochester, New York. He asked me to be on the board to be able to serve and help. Mission Continues helps out veterans who say, I want to still have the camaraderie. I still want to have the service to my country, but I'd like to do it through community service. And they've expanded here in Rochester into a network of veterans and non-veterans like myself who feel like they really want to keep sharing that service to everybody. And I want to thank them. Oh, thanks, man.
You're welcome.
It makes me, because I don't want to feel like you're reading my mind. Careful.
I try to be quick on the keys. That's why JR pays me the big bucks.
And I also feel like, it's so funny that we have never met, Amanda, and something as organic as a mocktail event is something that we did here in Rochester, and it was, in fact, it was going to be a sober bar. My partner and I, we just said, hey, listen, we know we can make some good drinks. We know that there's something there. Let's test the waters a little bit and see if we can do East Avenue. It's a stretch of bars. Let's see if we can get people to stop for 1 to 2 hours and use all the money that they make from that time into charity. But we'll see if people can serve. And it worked. And COVID hit. And we lost we lost the enthusiasm and the excitement in that moment to be able to do it. But I think it's so funny. You guys have the same kind of stuff going on.
Yeah, it's amazing. Because there's so many people that just they don't believe that you can have and we had so many people like donate like JR, like I said, he was there, and we had like a huge like liquid death, like donated a bunch of drinks, and we had cookies with our emblems on it. We had a guy named Hank, and he's in recovery, and he came in and he did all of our like band and music.
Ooh.
Our community is really amazing at really rallying together. And JR, I have to just throw his name out again because he is so wonderful at like picking people from any, like, putting everybody together, and really like building it. He's very supportive of every community, any kind of recovery, anything based like that. So it was a really cool thing. People were shocked. I mean, they were floored. And we have a couple bars downtown that are starting that are I think we have one. I want to say they haven't given an actual release date, but I think in the near future, they're going to be opening, and it's a complete sober bar. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, and I'm stoked because I've never, I'll say, quote, had a drinking problem, but I don't put myself in the position because I don't, one drink could, mess my head up and then I could make a bad decision. That's just my personal lived experience. That's nothing about anybody else's way that they recover, just personally. So I'm really excited to be able to like engage in like socializing, because we've talked, JR and I, that we need a bigger like sober scene. There's a lot of us, and we isolate. It's so normal for us to just isolate, be ashamed,
Absolutely.
or whatever, kind of be left out of events because there's alcohol or whatnot. So I'm excited to experience it.
It sounds great. And I'm glad that people are finding out that a mocktail is not just Sprite with a little bit of club soda and some maraschino juice. Because I know we had gone through some phases of drinks, and I'm like, I'm not going to get a hangover, but I'm definitely going to have diabetes by the time I finish this drink. And I also, I was also going to say, I got to thank Jr. for sharing his book too. That was very interesting read, and I'm glad that I could share it now with other clients too.
Yeah.
I know he's
Well, do
got
you
like
mind?
arachnophobia right now, or whatever bite he had going. So,
Uh-oh.
Arachnophobia.
Do you mind me asking a little more about, are you comfortable talking about your like active addiction and what you like, kind of your journey through active addiction into sobriety?
no, no, of course, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. We, yeah, I started off. I was about 13 years old. I was down with family in Nantucket, and I think I knew I had a drinking problem when I was given, your family gives you a little bit of cash to go shopping or whatever, and I used my money for a flask. I was like, oh, this is this is sophisticated. I'm sure this means my drinking will look cool, and I did. I bought a little flask, and at 13, I was going into school with my little flask filled with. I mean, it was thinking back how horrible it was now. I would mix in vodka with whiskey with wine, Bailey's, cream, whatever I could mix in, so it didn't look like everything was being drank all at one time. And then it became like a beer before school. I would drink warm beer, guzzle it down, and about the age of 15, that's when I started cocaine. I was at some hotel parking lot. I was selling weed with a couple friends of mine, and they introduced me to coke. And they said, "Jake, this might be a big thing for us if we can get people, get you out there and talk to people." And I was like, "Oh my God!" I was like, "Wow, we should just do this all the time," and I did. So it was, my marijuana selling became cocaine, and then by the time I was 15, 16, 17, I was still selling a lot of drugs. I dropped out of high school in my senior year, and I kind of got into petty crimes. I was, stealing, going out with friends. I had a group of guys that with me that we all got arrested together at some point. And at 18 years old, I got charged with a DWI. I got charged with, attempted assaults on cops, but there was a few of the other ones with attempted robberies, and it was all based around the drugs. I couldn't. There was not one moment that I could not go out, have a good time, by just having one drink. Everything opened the doors for me for cocaine. And by my 20 years old to 25, that's when I started getting into bigger stuff with, pounds of pot up to hundreds of pounds of pot up to, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I got arrested in South Dakota on my way back, and I think all those times that I was in jail were the only times I just did not use. And then it got worse because I went down to St. Louis, and I was working for the Iron Workers Union for the boss of the Iron Workers, and his name's Charles Marnotti. And in St. Louis, I guess the big thing, it was just one night. It was I had a town car because I was his driver in Little Italy. And I remember I would go from the laborers union, then to my other job at this Cafe Napoli place in St. Louis. And I couldn't get my dealer. I couldn't get my dealer to get me coke. He was like, "Listen, Jake, I'm not going to be able to get there till 11. I'm thinking it's 9 o'clock. I got to go to work. I need something to be professional." And I had a roommate at the time that smoked crack cocaine. And I always thought, look at this drug addict. He just wastes his time. And I thought, well, I've had 2 giant Cadillac mojito tequila mixer drinks. So I went and I tried crack cocaine for the first time. And I don't think I did it again for another 2 weeks. And then I got drunk again. I ran out of regular Coke, and I got heavy into crack. I was getting big checks, and I was spending almost $1,000 at a time, burning through it in a day. And then I left, and I got another arrest, assault on officers in St. Louis, and came up to Rochester, and I found out that a good friend of mine who I had introduced to cocaine had a crack addiction. And so it got even worse. I was like, well, I said, why don't we do it together? That way it's, we can put our money. And that turned into full-blown addiction. And at some point I just got myself, as soon as the same time that I got a dog, I got myself cleaned up. I just exercised a lot, and I don't know. It was just a lot of determination, but I want to say that he's actually in recovery now as well, and he's got a great job at one of the best brokerages in New York. So it did work out for him in the end.
Awesome. So I feel like I'm taking over and I'm not giving Brett any time to say anything.
No, go ahead.
No, you're totally fine.
Okay. Just tell me to hush if I need to. So would you say that you believe that people say like you have to change people, places, and things, all 3. You can't change one in long-term success, which there's always, an exception. But would you say that it's important to change people, places, and things when trying to, get like into recovery and sobriety?
I would say, my circle of people was always very small. And, they always say there's no geographical solution to an emotional problem. Mine was, hey, listen, I could find drugs almost anywhere. But changing the people, it was a mindset. I was always in restaurant business. So that was kind of That was kind of my social group. And of course, when you're in the social group with a lot of people in restaurants, there's a lot of drugs around, a lot of drinking. So removing myself from that. But the one thing I was not comfortable with was being by myself. Whether it was because of ADHD or something else, it was very hard for me to manage my time on my own. It was heartbreaking to actually have to think that I might have to be independent and take care of things and influence, good things in my life without anybody else's help. But yeah, I would kind of agree with that sentiment that people places. I mean, I sometimes you have to have nobody around because you realize that you're the unhealthy source of whatever's going on. Introducing people to drugs, getting them to get into crime. Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment.
What about your look on police, like law enforcement now? Obviously, when we're using, we're not going to have the best outlook. Um, you know, duh, right? So what about now? Do you think, I mean, obviously your relationship, I'm assuming, with the law enforcement has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'll be very honest, I don't think there's a time I was ever pulled over that I did not get an assault on an officer. I think in the past 17 arrests that I had, 6 of them included assaults on officers. And in fact, I went as far as to get a silence tattoo on my neck before I went to court because I wanted to make sure that people understood I don't contact the law, I don't speak with the law, I had no respect for them. My family, we had a disregard for police officers. We were sort of trained, instructed. It was learned that we don't trust them. We see them as the opposite, and they, we're on the gamut between each other. They're on the other side of the spectrum. And then I met somebody. It was an officer who works at the opioid task force. His name's Deputy Mike Favata, and I wanted to know. I don't think I spoke to a cop since willingly since the DARE program. And I heard about a friend of mine. It's okay to share this because he's public about this. Jeremy Marconi, who I went to high school with, and I found out that he had overdosed. And it broke my heart because Jeremy was a brilliant, happy, good-looking guy that had everything going for him in that moment. And I found out that the opioid task force was comprised of an officer and a special team that would work with services, work with people, find them. And on Christmas, my buddy overdosed, and Deputy Favata went to the house and said, "I'm not here to arrest you. I don't care if you have drugs on you." His family's all Sicilian. They didn't want to have to listen to this. People come into that. And he said, "But I can get you the treatment. Smoke a cigarette, but just talk to me." And he got up to the treatment. And now my buddy is not only in recovery, but he's also in peer engagement, working on becoming a counselor. So that gave me some faith in him. And then I said, forget it. Let's just have Deputy Favata on the show. And he was one of the coolest, nicest guys I've ever met. He's kind. His job. I mean, the way he talks about it was less about talking about the enforcement and arrests and going after addicts. He was talking about it from speaking from experience with the people that he's helped. And I could tell that it really pained him knowing that there was people that he couldn't save. And so I saw humanity in law enforcement when I had never tried to look. And eventually we had him on again. And I met LaRon Singletary, who actually was kind enough to reach out to me he was the Rochester City Police Chief. And he said, "I'm running for Congress, and I'd really like to be able to understand about recovery and your aspect and from your experience." And he came on the show with Deputy Favata, and I learned quite a bit. And in fact, it was one of the best things you can do in recovery is to shut up and listen. And that's what I did. I shut up and I listened to cops who have had to go to people's homes and deliver the news that somebody died from an overdose. And I realized that, this might be a job. They might have a badge, but they also have a heart. And that it was a change in me to be able to understand that, you're no longer my enemy. That maybe we may never be friends, but you definitely lost an enemy. and you've got an ally now. So that was a big shift in my life.
That's amazing. The reason I asked that, just quickly, is because a lot of people I don't think see. So obviously, we have bad in every profession. Just to start my statement off, there's bad police, there's bad doctors, nurses.
Mm.
I mean, there's bad everything. You know, construction workers, iron workers, recovery coaches. I mean, there's bad of everything. However, police, law enforcement, obviously, they get a bad rap. And so we I really believe that helping your community really does start like you've done, bringing them on your show. Mount Pleasant Police Department, we're very close partners with the police department in our close, community. And they, we do Narcan training at our local police department every month. We have a free
Beautiful.
Narcan training. And they're like 100% a part of it. I mean, they're there, they're speaking, they're learning, they're, they have like donuts with cops where they go to like coffee shops and literally eat donuts and coffee with the community. They have big kid events. They go and the SWAT team repels from the school. Just, the hospitals for like the cancer, beautiful children that are struggling. And so just to speed it up, it really has made a difference in our community that, we have laws in place, obviously, and laws need, we need laws, we need rules. It keeps people, for the most part, but they are so much deeper than that. And so you really getting to the personal, that there is a heart behind that badge, and humanizing them really does make a difference. Because with addiction, of course we're gonna hate them when they're arresting us. We don't want to go to jail. So it's a really cool thing that you brought them on, and I'm really glad you experienced that, and it made other people experience it by bringing him on.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. That being said, if I'm at a four-way stop and I have the chance to cut off the cop, I'm still doing it. I'm going to take it.
Go for it. Go. Brett, do you have anything to say? Do you want me to just keep talking?
Oh, if you're on a roll, I'm gonna let you keep talking.
Okay. All right. Okay, so Jake, harm reduction. How do you feel harm reduction plays in our numbers? Or, how do you feel about the overdose rates? Have you like seen the numbers? Do you feel like they've doubled, tripled?
It's funny. I guess when I started at Baden Street, I knew I was going to be working in the city in Rochester. I don't know if I just had the expectation that it would just be like Panic at Needle Park, and everybody was just people were just overdosing over each other. And then I saw that a lot of the problems that we're facing are overdoses, but I see a lot of K2, people getting hospitalized for K2. It's rampant here on a lot of corner stores, and I've seen a lot of people get very sick from doing it. As far as harm reduction and overdoses, I think part of me was always concerned that having safe injection sites, might. For some reason, I always thought that it was better just to get into chemical dependency, and having those clinics open for people to have safe injections was wrong. But it's very recently that it's been, research and listening to people, how I've seen how that is a very valuable tool, and it's a great strategy, because when you find out that the overdose rate at a safe injection site is 0%, you can't argue with the data. It makes sense to be able to have harm reduction in that sense. I'd like to be able to see. I'd like to see a shift in the programs for school to be able to reduce the amount of overdoses as well. I mean, the police have already said that their program didn't work. If anything, it influenced it in a negative way on the behavior of kids with drugs. But I feel like there's more opportunities and exploratory visions of what people could make for school for kids, especially in the next 5 years.
You're absolutely right. We're seeing a lot of pushback for you know, a lot of people are very focused on high school, and we should be. We need to be focused on high school, college, but we're seeing numbers in middle school. I mean, and the education and the awareness starts in elementary school. You know, like I said, I'm 4 years sober, and I lost my husband to addiction, and my kids, you know, they're about to turn 12 next week and 8, and you know, they witnessed a lot of things. And although, again, you would think that that would make you go the other way and not, you know, use, or it would teach them. Um, I'm very open. I carry Narcan. I teach, I train Narcan. That's part of my job is harm reduction, HIV, Hep C, like program assistant type, like testing, peer support, you know, any kind of Narcan training. So I'm heavily into, I think everybody should have Narcan. And so we're really trying to get into the schools, middle school, high school, and up. And we're seeing so much pushback. They don't want to admit that it's a problem. They don't want to admit it and let us in. And we've had a couple breakthroughs. Nancy Shipman, our executive director, and our Creighton's House, which is our young adults outreach coordinator, Taylor, they have gone to Wando, our popular high school, and they've spoke, and they've really brought a lot of awareness and help people. But I 100% agree that we 150%, we need to get into these, like JR just said, early education programs in schools, because that's our future.
I think one of the most important pieces of being part of Rising Recovery is being able to do research and find out what works, what doesn't work in other areas. And I'm jumping way far ahead. I'm sure my everybody on the board for Rising Recovery is already like, Jake, don't push it. But you know, as far as sober living housing, that's something that I want in my community. The second thing I want is I want a recovery high school. I want a place where students who are in recovery or facing addiction and have struggles, including traumas, can go. There's over 50 recovery high schools in the country. Some of them are run as charter schools. Some of them run through public education. Even if the funding is done for 5 people to be in a school, or 50 people, that's the range, about 5 students, 50 students. That's something that I think that should be in almost every community. I can feel it. I feel like if you have young people who are strong enough, intelligent enough, and passionate enough to say, I do have a problem with addiction, but I know that it's something I can overcome if you give me some help. And we have a team ready to be able to help them in the system early on like that, I think we're going to be able to have a better future for them. I know that if I, at 15, when I was doing my first line, if I had gone to school the next time and someone said, hey, if you feel like you're struggling with addiction, you feel like this might be controlling a lot of your life, even if there was a 5% chance I would have listened, it would have been worth that. It would have saved a lot of heartbreak for me and a lot of heartbreak for all the people that I hurt from that time on.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I don't know if I should admit it, but I didn't even know that there were recovery high schools. That's probably really slack, but I didn't, and that's amazing. So we don't have the recovery high school, but at Wake Up Carolina, long story short, our executive director started Wake Up Carolina because her son Creighton died of an overdose in 2016, very shortly after treatment, I believe. And Nancy, as his mother, saw a need in the community. A lot of moms, they started a mother's gathering. Husbands started wanting to come. They started a father's group. We have a siblings group once a month virtually. But then we saw that there was a huge need for young adults. And there's things for adults. I wouldn't even say there's enough for adults and enough options, but there are options. But young adults, especially 5 years ago, it was, they didn't want to say, oh, I'm going at 14, they didn't want to say, oh, I'm going to a meeting. Oh, I've got to go to NAAA or whatever. So they named our program Creighton's House. So Creighton was her son's name. And so when the kids would tell somebody, oh, no, I'm going to Creighton's house, it sounded like they were going. And that is the goal, is to make them feel, and for them to feel that they are coming to a safe place, a friend's house. And they have built that program up to 20, 25 or more young adults every single week. And I'm talking ages like 13 and 14 to like 18 to 21. They have once a month, they have a Creighton's night out. They go and do either movies at the office, and like they have pizza every week, and they go bowling. We have like a Christmas festival light thing, and they go there. I mean, it's really absolutely amazing, and it's making a huge difference. So the recovery high school, I really am going to look into, because that's amazing.
Please do. It sounds like you guys have a lot of innovations that I will all be stealing by the end of the show to do in Rochester.
That's okay. That's what we're here for, right? Friends in recovery. So
Oh yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
how do you feel about all recovery? So, and you got 12 step NAAA. What about MAT treatment? All of the standing on your head, whatever.
Well, a lot of what I base, a lot of what I make, a lot of what I do, I'm stubborn, and I think I do a lot of it based on what worked for me. That's I when I remember hearing in The Departed. I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me. I do what I know best for Rise Up Recovery to be able to, navigate with people I meet in recovery. But I always keep an open mind. As far as you mentioned AA and NA a little bit, right?
Mhm.
That's something that has never been a part of my recovery. It's never been a part of anything I've done in the past 3 years. I feel like, in honesty, I've had some restrictions with that. I've had a very difficult time being able to break into that community. And even if it was something I was trying to serve or organize, I feel like it was, I didn't quite connect. I feel like there was a bit of a hierarchy, even in the recovery world, about, sharing and networking, communicating. Recovery out loud is amazing, and being able to do that. But me being in, and maybe it's honestly just me, because if I go into an AA meeting or an NA meeting, I get triggered. There's very few times I'll get triggered. But sitting down and listening to something, it puts me into a very awkward position where I don't function well. But Matt and stuff like that, absolutely.
That's what I was looking for. No, just kidding. Just kidding. So I want to take a second, because I know people are watching, and this is my biggest little quote movement that I want to really harp on and for a second, is all recovery. And that is a very big part of Matt. So my recovery journey, and everybody's is different, and I respect all 12 step NA, AA, but I'm like you. 12 step did nothing for me. Now I know 100 people that it's done amazing for. It just, again, my lived experience, it did not do good for me. NA and AA type things, I left feeling worse than I did when I got there. And again, just me. However, Matt, when I started the methadone clinic, and when I say I'm 4 years sober, that was the day that I started the methadone clinic, starting February 1st of 2018. And it did such wonders for me that when my husband was killed 3 months into my recovery, I was able to stay clean. And there's some strength there. God is an insanely huge support, family, I mean, counselors, I mean, on and on. But I truly 100% believe that if I wouldn't have had the methadone and the clinic itself, I wouldn't have made it. And I have been shamed for years to not tell my story, and to not admit that I'm on Matt. And I have a very close friend who I've gotten extremely close with lately. And when we started talking, she told me, that she was sober, and that her first year was on MAT treatment. And then I shared my story, and she, heard it. And I very loud and proud, MAT is recovery, any pathways, all pathways, your journey is your journey. I'm just glad you're alive. Where there's breath, there's hope, all the things. And so
Absolutely.
she came back to me and she said, not that she lied, but that my live pretty much like kind of I guess spoke in a way to her, and that she says that she's, you know, she was a year on Matt, but that the truth is that she's still on Matt. She's just been shamed and not wanted to admit it, and that through me being so loud and so proud and continuously just throwing it, Matt is recovery, Matt's recovery, no shame, no shame, no shame, break the stigma, break the stigma, that she felt more comfortable to admit it and speak on it. And that was probably in all the work that I've done in the last year with Wake Up, with Against the Odds, Recovery Revolution, the Hope Shot, was probably one of the most insane, amazing moments of my entire life, to know that I took shame away from her walk. So I 100% agree with you. Just because those paths did not work for us, for me, this path did. And it is recovery, and it is a path, and it's our story and our journey, and it's always going to be different. We support each other.
Yeah, absolutely, Amanda. Having the opportunity to speak people about their recovery, what worked for them, and also what doesn't work for them. It's a learning experience for me. And if there's anything I want people to take away from Rising Up Recovery with what we're pursuing, what we're looking for sober living, to be able to hire peer engagement specialists, to be able to work in our facilities, is that we want to have recovery through service, deeds, not words. I want people to feel like they're being a part of something. What my recovery, I know that my recovery became very, it was at the best point or the highest point when it became less about serving me and more about how I could serve someone else's recovery. What could I do? I'm in a healthy place. What can I do to give my time, my experience, and my knowledge, as limited as it is in recovery, to be able to guide someone else's efforts, just like people did for me? Because, I think about AA, NA, the times that those were made, the stigma was at the highest. Stigma was, I had somebody compare it to like a speakeasy. You go in and it's, behind closed doors, and, you have a network of people that are almost hidden. And I've got friends in AA and NA. My girlfriend, she's been in recovery. She's been amazing. She's my inspiration for recovery too. But, we do clash about that sometimes. And I do think about the value of things like Matt, like AA, NA, even Heroin Anonymous. I remember I was in a group for Cocaine Anonymous. I'm like, if it's Cocaine Anonymous, you should probably be in there. And it was not something that worked well with my, day-to-day addiction.
Absolutely. Brett.
I'm still here.
I know you're here, but do you want to say? I have like 4 questions left.
No, go
Jake
for it.
said, I hope you got questions, and I got questions.
Man, you're an all-star. I don't even have like a pen and paper in here.
Well,
I like that you cut the questions down. I started off having a lot of questions in my interviews with people early on, and then I realized I was like, sometimes it's a little more fluid if you don't have them prepared, and you throw them at the last second. And
yeah.
I didn't always like the answers though.
So far, I like them so far. I won't tell you though if I don't. Okay, so let's see. What would you say the top things that helped you get sober and stay sober? I know you said that, like, your beautiful pup, but are there any other, in the gym, any other things that, just for people listening, if they're starting their journey?
Yes, yeah. Being humble, that was not a strength of mine. Maybe that's why I wasn't so into some of those support groups, because I have to be humble. And I found that in my recovery, I had to understand that sometimes you don't have to surrender. Sometimes you have to, you don't surrender because of something. You find the strength. There was a time. I've got a beautiful canal behind my townhouse, and sometimes I would walk along that canal, and I thought, I'm depressed. I've been arrested so many times. I'm most likely going back to prison. Um, I did cupcake time like 2 years, and I would walk along that canal, and sometimes it felt like my feet weighed 100 pounds. That next step just to be able to walk. And I started doing that because I got told by this guy, Robert Veeder, amazing counselor. Uh, I'll send you guys his information. He's incredible. He told me, he said, it's 15 minutes for every craving. So I was like, well, I'll go out for a 30-minute walk and I'll go all the way around. And I got to tell you, there were some times on that canal that I felt like I could have walked into the water and just disappeared. I felt like I could just melt away because, maybe it was suicidal, maybe it was depression. But, in those moments, I said that next step, getting around, finding something else, going to the gym, whatever it was. So, I guess finding that strength in every moment that you can take and realizing what your potential could be and what you want your potential to be when you are in recovery. I walked my dog. I took her out. I went to the gym. I organized my time. I found community service. I wanted to be of use. I think so many times that people early in the recovery, that's like, what can I do for me? Can I go to here? Can I do this? And for me, my focus was, I'm not good with myself. What can I do to be around other people, but be of service to them? So if I could recommend anything, it would be find your strength, imagine what your potential could be, get some hobbies that are healthy, and try to be around people who are like-minded or even not like-minded. There's tons of people that I don't agree with sometimes. My best friend, I can't stand him, but Danny Hefner, if you're listening, I hate you. But he gives me my best ideas, and he was very supportive through everything. So those would be those are probably the most important things that got me through my recovery.
That's amazing things. Um, my best friend for years, her name's Ashley, and it's we're the funniest pair because I have done drugs for years and years and years, and she's never done any drugs. She's never smoked weed. Yeah, like polar opposites. I mean, there's just nothing but like complete polar opposites, and she's she's the most amazing person obviously I've ever known. Not judgmental. When she got with her boyfriend, she was like, he was doing drugs too, I knew him. um and she's, like I said, she's an amazing person. So he, that was his inspiration, a huge one, to get sobered up. And he quit smoking weed and everything. And I remember at that point, she didn't understand addiction. She didn't understand a lot. And she was like, if he smokes weed, I'm leaving him, And I was like, okay, dramatic. Quit being dramatic. But she didn't understand. And I'm not condoning, nor am I not condoning all pathways, all recovery. I'm good with whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But for her, it was such a mind like blowing experience, because I'm sitting here going, if he smokes weed, you're leaving him, but I'm your best friend. Like, what? I think she probably hated me quite a bit at times. But through people who we, opposites attract, and that's for obviously friendships as well, because I don't like a lot of the stuff that she says either. Okay. So Brett has to help me on this because JR asked it to me, but I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. So they asked me when I came on, I think he said, what's the opposite of addiction? Do you believe that the opposite of addiction is connection? Is that right, Brett?
You are correct.
Yes.
You get a ding.
Hey, I got the ding. What?
You could have had sound effects the whole time. No.
I try not to use them when we're doing like serious stuff. I use them for like banter times.
Okay. So then, yeah, do you believe that the opposite of addiction is connection?
I guess. I mean, I feel like it's relative. It's the context. I mean, there was not a time that I was not around somebody. My entire life, it was either a drink, there was people around. I was always very social. It worked well for traffic distribution because I would meet with people and connect, often over drinks, often being very social and connecting with people deeply. I'm not going to lie. When I was using, I could still have those moments where you bond with people and read them well. And then I got into recovery, and I was like, nah, I hate people. I can't stand. Every little thing, I was like, dude, they're breathing too loud. I think one of them made eye contact with me. I was like, what happened? Is this really, maybe this is me? After using drugs for 15 years, it's kind of like when your car is buried under the snow and you're digging it out and you're trying to make the shape of it to figure out how to get in. And I was like, I don't know what I look like anymore. I don't know what my identity is. So talking about the opposite of addiction, connection, I don't know, I'm connecting with people now. It's a very small amount of people. I network wide, but as far as that connection part, I'd say it's a little more limited than it used to be. So it's hard for me to answer on that. I got a phone filled with numbers and emails and stuff, but there's only about 2 or 3 people I would call to be able to talk to that was meaningful. And maybe before when I was using, there was a lot more people I could just call in the middle of the day or whatever it is to be able to talk over things. But at least this time I'm not getting arrested after I talk to them.
That is a very good positive.
I'm still going to give you the ding.
Hey, you got a ding.
Thank you.
That question was super hard when they asked me that. I was like, what? Like, hold on, wait, hold on, what? And then I thought about it. Like, I was thrown. I mean, if you look back, I'm sitting there going, that's a hard question. Like, it took me a second to be like, but so
the Sphinx over here.
Yeah, it's like, I guess it's like, from what I gathered from what they were saying, and I guess I get, so we're very social, it seems like, for the most part when we're using, especially certain substances, because you're outgoing, you're numb, you're like, let's do it, and then you get sober, and it's kind of like we are like secluded, we isolate, especially in the beginning. You don't know, you isolate because you don't know where to go that's safe. You don't have a safe place yet. You don't know, there's shame, there's stigma, and you don't know who to trust. And so through working through sobriety, building that support, you have less people in your phone now, but you're connected in such a stronger way than with the addiction crowd, I guess. It's a, like you said, you're not going to jail. It's a positive connection, a safe space for you.
Yeah.
Hey, two. Hey. Okay.
That is good. That is good.
Let's see. Okay, biggest gift in recovery. Or gifts. You can do more than one. I won't limit you to one.
Biggest gifts. So, best things I've seen in my life since recovery.
Yeah.
All right. One would be, well, as much as I love my sweet German Shepherd Allie, she was a beautiful gift, wonderful. I would have to say meeting my girlfriend, Abby. We were working with a mutual client. I was doing care management for her. She had, this woman had very serious schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, PTSD, rape trauma. I mean, everything. But she was good to work with. She was very pleasant. The human trafficking court said, hey, you'll be a good role model for her to learn it with men and understand them and so she could feel independent, but still rely on you for some help. And I went into court, and I saw her as Abby, looking beautiful, and I introduced myself, and I think I was like, well, I'm actually a care manager, Baden Street Settlement, and uh, I saw my client. It was actually my client who felt so comfortable with her that she put her arms around her, and she cried and hugged her. And there was a moment that I saw that there was this humanity, there was this heart and tenderness that I recognized. I said, that's something that is beautiful. It's a quality in people that maybe you'll never see your entire life, where somebody can have that kind of sympathy and understanding. When she closed her eyes and she felt safe, and I thought, she better be single, because, because I would really like to be able to talk with her outside of work. So I said, listen, I'm a kind of a radio personality, and I'd really like to be able to pick your brain about being a peer engagement specialist in court. And it might be better if we spoke over dinner.
Woo! Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Fred. And we fell in love.
That's a
So
really
yes, that
beautiful
that
story.
so that would be that Allie, um, forgiving a lot of people. That was another gift that was unexpected. Being able to sit somebody and understand it, and forgive myself for some things too. That was all sort of gifts that I didn't even know. That nobody tells you what the road recovery is going to look like and who you're going to see along the way. They might tell you that it's a fantastic journey, and it could be labyrinth. You could be that journey where you're like, oh man, this is all wonderful. It gets me to the best places. But sometimes it's made life so real to me that being sober and thinking about the stuff that's gone in my life, it kind of hurts. And but it's still a gift, and I still am grateful for it.
Absolutely.
We have
So
a,
go
I
ahead.
was gonna jump in because we have a question from the audience. Michelle asked, "What's the average age kids start using? What age do we start talking? When is too young? When is too late?" I'll throw that question to either of you.
I feel like now with TikTok, social media, I feel like an old guy already. But when you have opportunities to be able to introduce the things in a entertaining way, kids joke about it. Smoking weed now, it's legal. I mean, if you think about it, for the first time in New York State, for at least for us, we've got marijuana. You can have a certain amount of it, but the problem is it's hard to compete, as a parent, with certain media outlets when they're so easily accessible. And kids are so open nowadays about being able to talk about things. And I think it's a very important thing to say, hey, if it's 12 years old, 13 years old, I think that's kind of around the age. I feel like that would be a good time. Uh, Mainly because that's when they're getting into those places where they can actually get their hands on the stuff a little bit easier.
Well, and she just posted a follow up comment. She said she has a 7-year old with two addicts, one in prison. She's asking questions.
Oh yeah, that's good to be
Yeah.
able to, for somebody who has, spent some time in prison, has a daughter, and wishes that it had been able to have that conversation earlier on. What does it mean to be able to be addiction? I think it's hard for children to be able to actually understand that there's something that's a chemical reaction that's so overwhelming that it can put the needs of an addict or their mother or father or whoever it's related to, it can mean more than love
Mm.
in those moments. It's one of the biggest difficulties I have with some of my clients. They have children. I have to go to child protective services. I've got to go to family court every month. And I see sometimes the kids, they know that there's something that they don't understand. It's a mystery. Even at 14, 15 years old, there's something. I mean, how could anybody really understand at that age? Oh, parents addicted. Yeah, it's good to have that conversation. It's good because what you want to do is you want to break that cycle. You want to be able
Yeah.
to insert some information and data with love in tandem so that they're comfortable about being able to talk about it. Otherwise, you can either have them get the stigma where they don't want to talk about their parents recovery at all, or you get the one, or you get the one where they talk about it, but they attempt to use. And that cycle is something that I get scared of. I look at people and I'm thinking, I've known you for 2 years now. You just lost your daughter. It happened in a terrible way. Now she's in pain. You're in pain. You guys don't see each other, but she knows that there's an easy solution to be able to negate those feelings, and it's how you did it. And that's a terrible kind of guilt and blame you don't want to ever put on yourself.
I want to say too. I have an 8-year-old, and so I'm sure you've heard. I'm 4 years sober. So she was about 4 when I got sober. I also have a 12-year-old, so she was 8 when I got sober. And that was the ages as well, 4 and 8, when my husband, their father, died, which was addiction related. So the talk with them has been very hard, very hard. And because of my work, and I'm very much so on lives, I'm, Narcan training. My jacket says, ask me about Narcan training. So I have a lot of conversations about addiction. But what I realized, especially with parents, is that the biggest thing that my kids needed to know personally, my children, is that all the times that I technically chose to go steal stuff to get pills, and I brought them to the pill house and got, they would say, mommy's going to hustle and then going to the country to get blues. So mommy's going to steal stuff to go to the country and get Oxy 30s. That was their way of telling, what I was doing. And they were right. So explaining to them that that's wrong and that it's not okay, and that they were loved, that even though it's going to seem like they weren't loved and that the parents chose addiction over them, it's not that easy of a choice. You can love your children as much as anybody sober and still mentally not be able to make that decision. I don't believe that you can be addicted and be a wonderful, great parent. I don't know that there's a way to really juggle. You could be a good one, a loving one, absolutely, a present one. But
Sure.
For me, I don't think I could ever be I don't think I was a good mother until I was sober. And I think being open, yes, and explaining it, they're not going to understand. It's a chemical imbalance and serotonin, dopamine, and, all the receptors. They're not probably going to understand that. But how I explained it to my 4-year-old and 8-year-old at the time was that it was like a sickness. It was a different sickness. I was sick, and I had to go and I had to get help, and they helped me, and now I'm better. And as they got older, I would let out a little more things. They went to the clinic with me. But explaining that it's a sickness and that it's not something that we can just choose, I think is a huge thing, so that they don't feel guilt or like they weren't enough or they weren't worthy of love and being chosen over the addiction.
Wow. It's powerful. But yeah.
I hope I explained it right.
I think you did. I think you did. I think you explained that in the way that, I think a lot of people would be considering, like, should I tell a 4-year-old about that? That was a great way to put it.
Thank you. So I only have 2 questions left. So the one, Brett's been absolutely phenomenal, and it was best way for people to find your radio show, everything online. He's been amazing, and he's, I think, posted everything.
Absolutely.
So just to reiterate, if somebody missed the beginning, through the comments, all of Jake's stuff is, there's links to everything. Y'all need to make sure you follow him, because as you can hear, he's amazing. So my last question, see, it's popping up again. My last question that I guess I'll leave with, because we've kind of got into the hopes for the future and what you want to do. Just 3 pinpoints that you want people to take with them tonight. 3 big, if you only could say 3 things to reach as many people, bring awareness, everything, what would 3 things be that you would choose?
That's the question I ask It's like one of the questions I ask people on the show. I like to be able to say, what would you like to tell somebody who's suffering from addiction right now? And the number one thing I always hear is you're not alone. And it's a wonderful idea. It's a great opportunity to be able to talk about resources. There's that feeling of wanting to talk about passion and beautiful words and trust and love and finding community and faith. That's wonderful. But it also should mean that you should also focus on the resources that are available in the community. If there's a place that helps out with chemical dependency, follow it. If you're in your recovery and you're realizing that, maybe you're slipping, you're having a hard time, reach out to those people. I mean, there's professionals. Just like it's a disease, there's people there to cure it. Depend on them, be humble and be able to take that time to speak with them. Just like if you would with any other sort of medical problem. I've got a primary care physician that he's been open enough to say, hey, if anything ever goes on with your medical treatment and you feel uncomfortable, just call me, reach out to me, call my office and tell them it's an emergency. And so I'd say that get in touch with medical providers, trust in the community with resources. Number two is, consider your potential in your recovery. Consider not just people in recovery, because I'm sure there's a lot of wonderful people right now who are not even in recovery, but are still interested in learning about, what we do as far as services. So please, please think about the potential afterwards of what you're capable of. I always tell people I do a mentorship program for young men. And one of the things I always say, think like a leader. If be a leader for yourself, but be a leader for others. Ask more of yourself from your recovery. A leader has to think like a philosopher, conquer as a saint, or as an emperor, and serve as a saint. So try to, take all your best qualities and put them to work for others. If there's anything I can say tonight for people, serve others, help in some way in your community, and that will feed you somehow. It will help you. I got to get one of those.
And Michelle, I just want to, if you need to talk and you need anything, please don't hesitate to send me a message or anybody, definitely outsource, because like Jake said, you're not alone, and it might be a different situation. But I've lived it, and I've had to explain as a parent, as an addict. So I'm here for you specifically, and there's a whole group of community that can wrap love around you and help you with those tough questions and support the children and yourself.
You got any other questions, Amanda?
No, that was my probably 10 or so.
They're
Sorry,
all great.
y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed hearing it. It's very inspiring.
Oh, and thanks, Michelle. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, anything else, guys? Are we ready to wrap things up for the evening?
I was going to say, if anybody wants a link to what we do in Rochester, New York, over at Baden Street, I know you had the website link up. I'm going to be hosting their town talks every month. So we're going to be able to, it's going to be in June, and we're going to be able to speak with community leaders, politicians, have a lot of people come in from different organizations and share what they do. One of the best things about being in recovery and doing what I do is I'm a resource broker. I can go over there and I just get that Rolodex, and I know each name for every person I need for what kind of help, which really helps build that network that I depend on, every single day for the clients. So if you guys ever want to check that out at badenstreet.org, please just click on there. I'm sure there'll be a link. Oh, JR. How about this? How about you guys will be the first one on our new introduction in the studio. I know social media, it's got its pluses, it's got a lot of negatives too. If you miss one mistake or you lose an account or something, so we're restructuring that as soon as we get the website out. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
JR has his own recovery Rolodex.
Yep.
Awesome, guys. Well, Jake, I do appreciate you coming on the show tonight. It was
Oh man,
excellent. I
thanks.
appreciate everything you had to say. Amanda, thank you for filling in as a guest host. It's always a pleasure to have you on as well. So
Thank you.
appreciate both of you guys coming on tonight
Thanks, guys.
and filling in. For anybody that is watching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications so you know when we go live. And if you guys haven't figured it out just yet, it's every Thursday night, so that's pretty easy to remember, depending on what time zone you're in. I know for me here in the Central Time Zone, it starts at 7. So yeah, just tune in every week so you can watch us on YouTube or on the Facebook page. If you guys would like to send us voice messages that we can play on the show, this is the link to do so. Speak-to.us/RRL. You can leave. I think it's up to like a 3-minute audio recording, and we can play those on the show. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, praise and adoration, whatever it may be, you can leave that for us at that link. And JR had sent me some sober birthdays, and I wasn't able to get that video put together for the April birthdays, but we should have that up and ready by next week so we can celebrate some people that are staying sober out there and letting other people know that they are staying sober. So hopefully by next week I'll have that up and running. Um, I had a 1-year old that I had to take care of, and I just didn't have enough time to quite get that put together. But we will definitely have that ready for next week. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Remember, guys, progress, not perfection.